I love a good poisoning. The more intricate, the better. And no one in all of history has been more merciless and creative in poisoning his enemies than the man himself, William Shakespeare. To give you some perspective, I would refer to this morbidity and mortality chart of Shakespeare's plays. As you can see, trauma via stabbing is the largest component. There are some more obscure deaths, such as pursued by bear, baked into a pie. You thought Game of Thrones did that first, you are mistaken. But poisoning is a large percentage. Now, as emergency physicians, we are required to be experts in toxicology, but the toxins in Shakespeare have befuddled even the most keen scientists and scholars for centuries. Thus, this lecture will analyze 3 of Shakespeare's most famous poisonings, whether these poisonings are medically legitimate, and in the rare instance that one of these poisons presents to your emergency department, key points in management. The first poisoning is in Romeo and Juliet, and as a refresher, Romeo and Juliet fall madly in love and secretly get married. But Juliet is promised to marry another man. So before her wedding, she ingests a poison that makes her appear as if she is dead for 42 hours. Scientists and scholars have racked their brains on what type of mysterious substance would allow Juliet to appear catatonic for days, only to miraculously awaken unharmed. Many theories have been proposed, but my favorite theory by far is poisoning by pufferfish. Tetrodotoxin is a neurotoxin. The toxin binds to sodium channels on skeletal muscles, leading to hyporeflexia and paralysis, and also binds to vascular smooth muscles, leading to hypotension. The lethal dose is small, estimated around 2 to 10 milligrams. The question is this poisoning medically plausible? I guess if Juliet took just enough to have a little respiratory depression, paralysis, a weak pulse, she could have tricked the untrained emergency physician eye that she was dead. And in fact, in Japan in the past, suspected victims of pufferfish poisoning were laid out next to their coffin until the corpse began to decay, just in case they revived. Treatment is supportive care, and you may see this as species exist in Oregon, California, and Alaska. My overall conclusion of this poisoning is if you want to poison your enemies just enough to make them a little dead, then tetrodotoxin's the way to go. The second poisoning is in A Midsummer Night's Dream. A juice of a flower is dropped into the eyes of Titania, causing her to fall in love with the first person she sees, who ends up being a man with the head of a donkey. Scholars have asked, what could this love potion be that makes a woman so demented and so blind that she would fall in love with an unsightly looking fellow? The plant is thought to be Atropa belladonna. The active ingredient is atropine, an anticholinergic. Symptoms include delirium and hyperthermia from antagonism of central muscarinic receptors and mydriasis from antagonism of peripheral muscarinic receptors. In fact, women in the Renaissance used to put atropine in their eyes to dilate them and make themselves look more attractive. And deaths from atropine are usually correlated to hypothermia complications. What is the medical legitimacy? Could drops in the eyes cause systemic symptoms such as delirium? Actually, yes. It's estimated that 65% of atropine eye drops are absorbed systemically. Now, treatment besides supportive care and cooling measures includes activated charcoal, which can be given beyond 1 hour due to gut inhibition caused by the anticholinergic itself. Generally, benzos are used for agitation, and physostigmine is reserved for refractory delirium. Remember, physostigmine is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor that crosses the blood-brain barrier. Dosing is 1 to 2 milligrams IV and can be repeated in 10 to 15 minutes. My overall conclusion of this poisoning is if you want to have your enemies fall in love with an ugly person, then this is the perfect poison. The third poisoning occurs in one of my most favorite Shakespeare plays, Hamlet. Remember, at the beginning of Hamlet, Hamlet's moping around because his father died and he suspects his horrible Uncle Claudius murdered him. This is confirmed when the ghost of Hamlet's father visits him and states that he was murdered by cursed Hebenon in the ear. So what is cursed Hebenon? It is likely henbane, often used in the 1600s for earaches. The name is literally translated from hen killer because chickens would eat these seeds and die. The principal poison is hyoscyamine, which is also an anticholinergic. So clearly Shakespeare loved a good anticholinergic poisoning. In fact, a lot of Shakespeare's poisonings are attributed to anticholinergics as they were widespread across Europe. Other examples include Jimson weed and mandrake. The interesting question here is, could someone be poisoned and die from the ear canal? And the science is not good. So in 1918, a scientist Mach gave dogs anticholinergics via the urethra and ear, noting some agitation and emesis at certain dosages. There's no modern toxicology text that reviews anticholinergic poisoning via the ear, though an Argentinian ENT in 2002 reviewed the literature and agreed that the play had some medical legitimacy. Even 2.5 square centimeters of ear volume would be enough to cause toxicity. The same management as before, so supportive care, cooling, benzos, charcoal. And the moral of this poisoning is, if you want to poison your enemies via the ear canal, the medical literature is a little dicey, but you may cure their earache. So my first conclusion from all of these poisonings is, had only an emergency physician been present in these plays, then Romeo may not have poisoned himself, Juliet wouldn't have stabbed herself, Titania may have swiped left instead of right on Donkey Man. Hamlet's dad wouldn't have died, Polonius wouldn't have died, Ophelia wouldn't have died, Gertrude wouldn't have died, Laertes wouldn't have died, Claudius wouldn't have died, and Hamlet wouldn't have died. Basically, the world of Shakespeare would have been a much more populous place. My second conclusion is that if you'd like to poison your enemies and save them, take inspiration from Shakespeare, but also consult a toxicology text, just to make sure you're doing it right.